Walt Disney was one of the most widely admired and respected figures of the 20th century. In an age when American society celebrated success and innovation and accomplishment rather than perversion, dysfunction, and grievance, Walt Disney was both a great innovator and a high achieving success story who wound up dying with more money than Scrooge McDuck. The company he founded is today the biggest and most valuable entertainment brand in the history of the world. Even after Kathleen Kennedy ran a pickup truck over Star Wars, then stopped, threw it in reverse, and backed up over it again just to make sure it was dead. But it wasn't his skill as an innovator, or his indefatigable work ethic, or his instincts as a businessman that made Walt Disney into the beloved figure he was during his own lifetime, and which he largely remains today. He became a beloved figure because, yeah, he liked making money as much as the next guy, and if you were in direct competition with him, he would do everything in his power to utterly destroy you. But there was a purity of purpose at the heart of the whole enterprise that you can't fake, and that's that Walt Disney genuinely loved making other people feel happy. And all the movies and the theme parks and the rest of it, that stuff all existed primarily out of that love. In the 1930s and 40s, when he was inventing and then perfecting the art of the feature-length animated film, Disney noticed something he didn't expect. Not only did the kids who were the target audience love the movies, but their parents loved them too. Disney saw grown adults experiencing the awe and wonderment of childhood through the prism of these animated films that he had created. So when he's already made his fortune and he's thinking of ways in which to diversify the business, he says, well, why not create a real-world location where kids and adults can both experience the wonderment of childhood, each in his own way? Now, Disney wasn't just an innovator and an achiever and a philanthropist. He was also a true, firm, proud believer in the greatness of America and in the power of the American ideal to be a force for good in the world. And Walt Disney understood that America was never made great in Midtown Manhattan. It was never made great in Washington, D.C. It was never made great in Los Angeles. America achieved its greatness on 10,000 different main streets in towns that you've mostly never heard of. And it occurred to Walt Disney that when he wanted to take a trip in his own mind and experience the nostalgia of childhood, the place he went was to the main street of the town in which he grew up at the turn of the 20th century, Marceline, Missouri, which thus became the model for the Main Street USA that is the first thing you see when you enter Disneyland today, provided you can spare $150 for a ticket or however the hell much it costs now. So in the early and mid-50s, when he was building Disneyland, that wasn't the only way in which Walt was diversifying the company. He was also starting to get into the production of live-action documentary subjects, one of the first of which was the series in which he partnered with Dr. Wernher von Braun for a look at the future of human space exploration, which you can go watch it right now on Disney+, and you should if you've never seen it because it's great stuff. But there were three distinct subject areas of Disney documentaries during those first 10 or 15 years that they were being made. Some were animal and nature documentaries. Some had to do with science and technology and futurism, like the Von Braun series. And others were on American history. Disney was fascinated with the technological achievements that were likely going to transpire in the 60s and 70s, which is evidenced by the amount of real estate at Disneyland that he devoted to building Tomorrowland, which was all about technology and innovation and futurism. But as a believer in the greatness of the American ideal, Disney understood just as well that a nation that seeks to accomplish great things in its future has to also be firmly connected with its past and to possess an understanding of the people and the events that made the country and the nation great to begin with. So when one looks at the life and the life's work of Walt Disney, one can't help wondering what he might think of the content his company is putting out today, and particularly, for our purposes today, the documentary film division, which in just the past 2 to 3 weeks has released heavily promoted, nauseatingly fawning, cartoonishly hagiographic, long-form documentary films about Anthony Fauci and Pete Buttigieg, A full disclosure, I haven't watched either one of these things because there is a limit to how much punishment I'm willing to endure in service of the art of citizen journalism, and frankly, if there is a hell and I'm destined to spend all of eternity there, they probably will have the Fauci documentary playing on a permanent loop, so I will have plenty of chances to see it, I suspect. Doesn't that sound great? A whole eternity of listening to the dulcet tones of Dr. Anthony Fauci and Secretary Mayor Pete. I like to imagine Joe Biden looking around the room during a cabinet meeting and saying, "Where's that gay fella? Didn't I make him secretary of something or other? How come he's never at the meetings?" And then Ron Klain jumps in and says, "Mr. President, yes, you did appoint that gay fella the secretary of something or other, but he's been on extended paternity leave these past 2 months." And then Biden says, "Paternity leave? Is his wife in a coma or something?" And then Clayton says, "No, sir, his wife is actually a dude." And then Biden says, "Oh, right, because he's the gay fella." And then Clayton says, "Yes, sir, he's the gay fella." And then Biden says, "Well, how can he be on paternity leave if his wife is a dude?" And then Clayton says, "Well, sir, they've been a bit cagey about that part. Secretary Mayor Pete and his dude wife, they posed in a hospital bed with a couple of newborn babies, but they want to avoid all discussion about where the babies actually came from." And then Biden says, so the gay fellow's been gone for 2 months, and he never had to give birth, and his male wife never had to give birth? What am I missing here, Ron?" And then Clayton says, "I ain't gonna lie, sir. It's pretty fucking weird." And then Biden says, "Didn't I see a movie once where that big Austrian weightlifter had a baby?" And then Clayton says, "Yes, sir. The name of the film was Junior. The star was Arnold Schwarzenegger. The year was 1994. And then Biden says, 1994. Was that one of the years I ran for president? And then Clayton says, "No, sir. That was actually a midterm year." And then Biden says, "Well, what was I doing in 1994 then?" And then Clayton says, "You were the senior senator from Delaware, sir." And then Biden says, "Holy shit, they're letting Delaware have senators now?" And then the host says, "Jim Eagle, hit the damn music." From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where our favorite Disney movie is Pocahontas because it makes us want to invite Elizabeth Warren over for a beer and some nice powwow chow. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to the program. I am your eponymous host and humble servant, and I think I'm not quite done with Secretary Mayor Pete and Grand Ayatollah Faucini the Great. Now, Anthony Fauci has had his current job longer than Pete Buttigieg has been alive. In the 40 years that he's been the head of the NIAID, there is no record of him ever having been right about anything. But since this is the federal government bureaucracy, where crippling incompetence just bolsters your job security, that hasn't prevented our man Tony from becoming the single highest paid employee in the history of the federal government. But here's the thing. Fauci being just an incompetent boob, that is the best case scenario. In the worst case scenario, if the facts of this thing are as bad as it looks like they might be, it's not very out of line to call Anthony Fauci an enemy saboteur. And if anyone thinks I'm being unfair with that characterization, let's set aside all the Disney documentaries and the fawning fake news performance artists, and you tell me if this scenario rises to the level of malfeasance where the person responsible for it should be referred to as an enemy saboteur. Number one, Anthony Fauci was instrumental in China being given the special dispensation whereby they were allowed to build a biosecurity level 4 facility which they were otherwise unqualified to build under binding international treaty. That facility, of course, became the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Number two, Anthony Fauci sent your tax dollars directly to the Chinese Communist Party to help finance gain-of-function research on bat coronaviruses at that same Wuhan Institute. And remember, gain-of-function research means, hey, this virus is really deadly in animals. Wouldn't it be great if we could make it infect humans too? Now, personally, I think gain-of-function is an overly innocuous and generous term because the thing we're talking about is the engineering of bioweapons. There is no version of legitimate scientific inquiry where you need to take animal viruses and try to make them virulent in humans unless you are engineering a bioweapon. Number 3, Anthony Fauci lied and lied and lied and lied, including at least 3 times in sworn testimony before the U.S. Senate Oversight Committee, about every facet of his involvement and the use of taxpayer dollars in this escapade. Just yesterday, in one of the most shocking public rebukes in the history of the federal administrative state, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, the head of which is technically Fauci's direct superior, issued an official statement saying that Fauci and Francis Collins, the former head of the NIH, who resigned in disgrace last month, had both made a series of false and misleading statements about their involvement with the engineering of the Chinese bioweapon. Number 4. So Tony Fauci and Francis Collins, among others, they all collaborate with their good buddies in communist China on the engineering and development of the bioweapon. A bioweapon which then, either accidentally or on purpose, escapes from the Wuhan Institute and goes on to result in the deaths of, at last count, something on the order of 5 million people worldwide. Number 5, it goes without saying that for those of us who live and work in the real world and not the permanent federal bureaucracy, if we had made a mistake in the discharge of our professional duties that caused 5 million living people to become dead people, there is a pretty strong chance that we would be fired and probably charged criminally, all things being equal. At an absolute minimum, we could expect to be demoted or take a pay cut or be given an official rebuke or have a letter of reprimand placed in our permanent HR file. But have any professional consequences redounded upon Anthony Fauci for the act of using U.S. taxpayer dollars to finance a Chinese bioweapon that then takes the lives of 700,000 Americans? Nope, there sure hasn't been. In fact, it's been quite the opposite. For Tony Fauci has managed to parlay his own status as at best a dangerously incompetent bumbling buffoon and at worst an honest-to-God enemy saboteur into wealth and fame and media superstardom. So try to imagine Walt Disney being alive today and consider how he might react to his company making a fawning documentary about a career bureaucrat whose dumb fuckery has killed more Americans than the Second World War. Do you think Walt Disney would want to see such a man celebrated, to have an entire ridiculous personality cult built up around him? And what's more, do you think Walt Disney would enjoy the idea of Disney documentaries that seek to cudgel the viewer incessantly with current-day political demagoguery? The last thing Walt Disney ever wanted to do was make a divisive product that contributes to turning Americans into members of intractably opposed ideological camps. But nearly everything the Disney company turns out today seeks to do exactly that. When Disney used to make documentaries about individual Americans, the subjects, well, they were people like Washington and Lincoln and Jefferson and Theodore Roosevelt, Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, the Wright brothers. In other words, exceptional men who through their talent and their work ethic made material, lasting contributions to the greatness of the American nation. And what has Tony Fauci ever contributed to the cause of American greatness? Bueller, sitting at the same desk for 40-odd years, shuffling the same papers around, going to the same meetings with the same people year after year, decade after decade. That's what passes for American greatness now? In the eyes of the people who run Walt Disney's company, bureaucratic drudgery and bouts of horrifically bad judgment are all it takes now to gain membership in a club that used to be limited to people who displayed actual greatness on a level that warrants being commemorated for all time? And look, when I say there's no record of Fauci ever having been right about anything, that is the God's honest truth. Fauci didn't become a virologist until age 40. And within 1 year of that, he became the top virologist in the federal government, the post he still occupies today, which has always struck me as really, really weird, but whatever. His first big test, the first time he got a taste of the media stardom he craves so ravenously, was when the AIDS epidemic first hit in the early and mid-'80s. And true to form, he got every single thing about AIDS wrong. And he seems not to have even learned any lessons from it, which
in itself is pretty remarkable. He decided early on that he wanted to go down in history as the guy who made the AIDS vaccine. So he deliberately steered research funding away from therapeutics, and untold numbers of people died who might not have needed to die because there still is no AIDS vaccine. But being HIV positive is no longer a death sentence because the therapeutics have become so effective. But Fauci wanted to take an approach that said vaccines are the only thing that matters, so I don't want to hear a damn thing about therapeutics, which sounds strangely familiar, doesn't it? It's almost like 2021 Tony Fauci sounds exactly the same as 1986 Tony Fauci. So stop pretending to be a faithful servant of scientific inquiry when you are pathologically incapable of even applying that principle to your own long and storied history of professional misjudgments, you psychopathic little ghoul. Seriously, when Tony Fauci sees the red light on a TV camera, I think it's the same Pavlovian response that Hunter Biden undergoes when he sees a hooker on a bed with a mountain of coke piled up on her boobs. But even still, having said all those unkind but eminently well-deserved things about Tony Fauci and his unfitness for being the subject of a Disney documentary, Fauci can actually make a much stronger case for getting his own Disney movie than Secretary Mayor Pete can, because it's not overstating matters to say the only reason Pete Buttigieg is currently a cabinet secretary in absentia, the only reason he was a presidential candidate last year, the only reason you have ever heard the name Pete Buttigieg is because he likes to have sex with other men. This guy has never displayed any real talent in any area of human endeavor. He was a professional student until the age of 30, which is so incredibly sad, but I guess fairly commonplace with this age group. And then he followed the trail first blazed by the great Bernie Sanders, where elected political office is the first form of gainful unemployment you've ever had in your worthless little life. Although to his credit, Bernie managed to hold out all the way until after his 40th birthday without ever having had any job of any kind, while Secretary Mayor Pete's first paying job was being the 32-year-old mayor of a college party town. But I'm gay. Did I mention that I'm gay? I'm Gay Mayor Pete, the gay homosexual mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And did you know I like to have sex with other men? I really like it a lot, because I'm gay. It used to be not so long ago that gay politicians didn't want people to know they were gay, so they would pay some attractive woman to enter into a sham marriage with them. And in the gay community, they used to call that a beard. But Secretary Mayor Pete has made an entire career of flipping that equation on its head. This dude actually wears his own gayness as a beard. There's nothing about this young man that evinces any sort of talent or exceptional skill at anything. There are lots of failed one-term mayors of college party towns out there, but most of them don't get immediately catapulted to the status of presidential candidate. But the mainstream fake news media were very desirous last year that there be a gay candidate in the field for the Democrat nomination. So they scoured the country looking for the perfect token gay, but all they could find was Mayor Pete. So they said, fine, screw it, we'll just take this guy. Which is the same way it went when Joe Biden, upon becoming the presumptive nominee, immediately announces, I'm going to choose a woman of color as my running mate. And a couple weeks later, everyone comes to the unsettling realization that there was no better choice than Kamala Harris. Mayor Pete never thought he had any chance of being elected president, or even at becoming his party's nominee, but that didn't matter, because as soon as he had won the casting call for token gay candidate in the primaries, he had his golden ticket. And from there, it was just a matter of parlaying it into a cabinet post. And look, everybody knows there doesn't actually need to be a Secretary of Transportation because there doesn't need to be a Department of Transportation. It's one of the cabinet departments that only exists to create a steady supply of patronage jobs, and Transportation Secretary is the absolute bottom rung of the cabinet ladder. The one where the person they stick in that job is always some sort of affirmative action token hire, and ideally, you can tick more than one box at the same time. So, for example, when George W. Bush was filling out his cabinet, he got to the bottom of the list, and he said, "Dadgummit, I've got almost all these spots filled, but I still don't have a token Asian or a token Democrat. What are we going to do about this?" And so right on cue, Norm Mineta, former Democrat congressman and card-carrying Asian guy, becomes the Secretary of Transportation. But then, of course, 9/11 happens. And there was actual work for the transportation department to do, and everybody wondered out loud what the hell this confused old Asian Democrat was doing in that job. And so, because nothing is ever new under the sun, today we have another unique transportation-oriented crisis, or challenge, if you will, as hundreds of container ships continue to loiter off the coast of LA and Long Beach waiting to be offloaded at some indeterminate time in the future. Things have actually gotten so bad, I've started hearing reports that some Americans are considering taking the drastic step of making cheap disposable crap for themselves rather than importing it from communist China. And it's even worse for me because I think my new Colin Kaepernick jersey is on one of those ships. I paid $400 for that thing, which is a hell of a lot, so I don't even want to think about how much more it would cost if it wasn't made by 8-year-old Chinese child slaves. I like to wear it when I'm out marching for social justice. And by marching for social justice, I mean looting a Walgreens, torching a couple of cop cars, and then curb stomping a Trump supporter. Thanks for watching. Have a pleasant tomorrow and an agreeable weekend. I will see you back here Monday. Do not comply. Get the hell off my lawn.